Hey everybody, what's going on? How's it going? Okay, I just wanted to come in and touch bases with everybody. Hey YouTube troopers, what's going on? It's Tam Behind the Mic, and I came to you with breaking news that as the Diddy trial is going on, as many may know, that Afrika Bambaataa has been accused of various different allegations of grooming and assaulting young children, and similar to the Diddy thing. Now, Afrika Bambaataa, as we know, was responsible for starting the Zulu Nation. And me, as a hip hop survivor myself, with injuries and a lot of scars from, the hip hop trying to break in commercially. As a kid, I started out in 1976, and it seems as though when it turned commercial, or even before commercial in the parks, that a lot of children underage was being groomed by older adults, and there was some youngsters that may have been very promiscuous, but I wasn't one. I had issues going on at home and so forth and so on. But before I go into me, I want to, shout out Leila Wills, because Leila Wills was the individual that broke and did the documentary Top Trapped in a Culture, the case against Afrika Bambaataa. And sis has been under the weather, not feeling well. And I've been doing what I need to do for me. I filed a claim. However, my case was dismissed because of so many technicalities. And as a person that deals with complex trauma and PTSD from all the things that have occurred and that happened to impact my now deceased daughter. So I'm raising my grandchildren who have special needs and have trauma. And I think that this is a win. There was a protest in 2023. Of course, I've been blackballed and so forth and so on. And, I have disabilities, got injured on the job, fibromyalgia, which is really caused by trauma and stress and things like that. And I'm still currently in therapy. And I'm still battling, those guys, that horrible human beings. You can have all of this art in the world and this talent, but it takes away when you get into preying on innocent children and even adults. That's the bottom line. Hip hop was pegged by the Bronx, but it wasn't necessarily created, because prior to the 80s, we were jamming in the parks. And from my research and from my studies and my firsthand experience, is that each borough was doing their own thing. I happened to be in Queens. My friends were older. My cousins were older. And, you have a lot of people that want to discredit you and say, oh, you wasn't there. I was there. I was at T Connection. I did go to the Audubons. I emceed at the Audubons. I emceed at the T Connection too. But when guys and people are trying to do this history thing, I believe that, it's been a shadow, a dark shadow over this particular genre, because of the division and the harm that it has caused the masses. You have people in higher levels that, are covering up and that are involved and to try to placate the trauma, the harm that has caused. Now, when I participated in the protest against, at the time it was the Universal Hip Hop Museum, since then now it's called the Hip Hop Museum. And I got to tell you, yes, I've had threats. that I should back away from the Africa Bambaataa situation to protect my legacy. But see, what people don't know, I left home at 13. I'm a tough cookie, been through some stuff, and I still stand and I still rise because I serve as a voice for the voiceless. And like I told the individual at the museum, but the individual that was at that protest, I don't know if he was John Doe or what, but when I shared my story, and I'm unapologetic to the story because it's true, um, and it gave me a sense of freedom. You have no idea how victims and survivors, what they go through with suppressing all of those terrible things that have occurred and how it impacts them for the rest of their lives. But anyhow, with the John Doe case, the individual told me that, they were assaulted by AB. And I believed him, and I remember being affiliated with Zulu Nation. A guy named Ron Zulu had brought me in, and at the time I just thought it was like a label. And I grew up in St. Albans and Hollis. Before D and DMC, before LL Cool J, no one wants to acknowledge the foundation in that area, which was Future Sounds, Ebony Sounds, and Unique Sounds. And my first manager was Gene, and I was one of the first hosts at the Love Nest. But my story will be told sooner or later. Um, and I was asked to change my timeline. And I remember when Africa Bambaataa was telling the one that they're saying that's the first female ever. That's a fan base thing. That's a fanboy, a fan girl, because I've done some research, and there was females before a lot of people came from the Bronx. No one knew what the other one was doing because you couldn't have been at two places at one time. And the way that the boroughs were, they were very divisional, and you had to have a pass. And it just so happens that one of my cousins, Jamaica, who's now deceased, and my cousin Honcho wasn't in the Seven Crowns, but Jamaica was. So that's how I knew Fat Cat and all of them. And I met people up in the Bronx when I was a kid in the kids' shelter on Union Hall Street, Queen's Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. Because I left home at 13 because I was sneaking out. My mother was a Jehovah's Witness, and I started out from the Double Dutch team with the rhymes, the hand games, Miss Mary, Mac, 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 and all of that stuff. And my family, when my parents was together, were musicians. So my narrative and my story differs. And when I had gone to one of the supposedly educational days at the Hip Hop Museum, I could feel the energy because as you grow and as wisdom and you acquire wisdom and you move and you horn into your own self, you learn how to decipher energy, from people, intuition, things like that sort. And I didn't see a lot of pioneers from all the boroughs. I really didn't. And I said, oh, they're just doing this to try to say their due diligence. And when I got up there and I said, how you doing? How you doing, Roblox? Hi. Anyway, and when you had to stand and say, well, okay, I'm a pioneer and I had intellectual property with me there. But however, I didn't give my stuff up, and as the way that they're doing is not equitable. And I thought that they were going to really go around like all the boroughs because I was so much on the go. Can you open your camera? No, I ain't opening my camera. I don't feel like it because I'm doing something. So anyway, I thought that they were going to do something equitable. But of course, when it comes to money, power, when it comes to money, power, and greed, our people definitely perish for a lack of knowledge. And everybody wants to be first. Everybody wants to take over the platform. Um, I have an extension history as being one of the first to even perform in junior high school when Boogie Nights was out. That was in 1976 with a friend of mine, Cricket. And that's the first time I ever rapped on stage. You know, I was in the parks previously because in our neighborhood, we only had PS 118 that had after school programs. So we had to make our own fun. And I had started emceeing at Lincoln Park. So I've had to go back and I've had to ascertain all of these documentations. Oh, and I must say that I was in a Queens hip hop photo exhibit in Queens Library. But my nemesis, I must call them nemesis, they were altering and backbiting, especially when I started sharing what happened to me, not only with them, but what happened before and how, I was groomed unexpectedly. And when I hear the testimony of what happened with the Diddy thing, it's like repulsive. And I remember having to rescue someone, some young ladies. I don't know if they was underage, but they looked very young, and they were doing cartwheels. They were running around calling them masters, and I had never ever seen anything like that. And my daughter, who's now deceased, one day we happened to be in the area because I was from that area. They had moved from Corona, and I remember Afrika Bambaataa being at their house too, because during that time, people was close, and I remember running into Bam. Hey, Bam. I might have been a lot smaller. I didn't have moles on my face. And he was like, hey, what's up, shorty? And that was that, because I knew AJ and all of them. I was already in Harlem, all over the place. These guys didn't know it, but I just thought that they was the hottest. And they gave me their number. And I met them through somebody that lived in their project that happened to know me when I was in the kids' shelter. And we would have talent shows and so forth and so on. And I was doing my thing. So all the children from all the boroughs. So that's how I was introduced to what the Bronx was doing. And that was Disco King Mario in Bronxdale. So and a lot of the stuff that they're doing with this history thing, it's like I don't agree with it. But it's okay to not agree with everything, but you can come to a consensus. But no, the dominant powers want it to go this way, and everybody is for this money grab. And now things are real shaky because now the culture has been the foundation of what they say is hip hop. The culture has been grape culture. I've seen, underage girls when these guys were living in Corona, in East Elmhurst, from the Mercedes lady. And it seems like they're being awarded because if you don't speak out against it, it's you with the go along, get along. I'm not that way. I'm a sad all day. And I must give homage to Angie Stone because even with Bee Stinger, right? He recanted and he's on his forgiveness tour and whatever. And I know that he was coerced. I'm not cut from that damn thread, and I got some protection. Trust and believe, you know what I mean? And we're not playing. And one of the reasons why I started speaking out is because of the damage that my daughter suffered from being in a very unhealthy environment and being in an environment where they knew that predators existed within that ownership. And it's just been a shiesty ride. Love from Ireland. Oh, thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe. Um, and it's just awful. And then when Layla Wills came out with that documentary, and I had remember when Ron Zulu had met me in high school. And by the way, I attended Grover Cleveland High School, which is the same high school that Cheryl Salt way. I don't know, James, I think, yeah, because she's divorced now. James attended. She wasn't rapping at the time. I used to freestyle from Queens to the borderline of Brooklyn. The guys would be banging. And, you know, a lot of these young ladies, they crossed over commercially. But meanwhile, my life was like in limbo because I was staying in a household where I thought someone was my friend. But ironically, that household was embedded with domestic violence and incest. And a lot of things transpired. And my dad wanted me to just stay there because at the time I thought it was all right. And I'm a fighter. I've had to fight all my life, unfortunately. So now I just fight differently. You know, I have to. Our children, our young people, we need to be protected. Now, people are saying about this S&M stuff that Diddy was into and everybody else, but a lot of that stuff is not consensual. A lot of that stuff is grooming. And it should not be a prerequisite, whether or not it's in the music industry, whether or not it's in any forms of entertainment, or even in the workplace, because I've had that encounter in the workplace. And a lot of times people will judge you on, your appearance and not knowing that, yeah, you were raised in a tough environment. I'm going to do probably a series on what happened to the children at Queensborough Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, because that particular place, they had such a whole mount of talented, troubled children. And ironically, it bothers me every night since I've unlocked the memories that I suppressed for so many years, decades I'm talking about, that there was an employee that was assaulting the boys. And I believe some of the girls had gotten assaulted because I was one of the children that remained there for a long time because they couldn't figure out what to do with me. But at the time, my cousin Jamaica used to pick me up and take me to 150 Park and 48 Park. And, I would be rapping and MCing, and Fat Cat was there. And, that's what we had. And I was so little and so short because I didn't grow much in height. I must have stopped growing, but that was a great time because that was like music was, the vibration was good. You understand? It wasn't negative. It wasn't inviting anyone to your private parts. And I think, I remember, I didn't know till years later, I had gotten accepted to the group home. So I got back in my neighborhood on Linden Boulevard, and I was really intrigued early on with performing arts because I was raised an only child. But however, I had siblings that were down south. And ironically, my mom was a survivor, and she was assaulted when she was a child. So now I really believe that it's up to me to clear that lineage line. And it was so awful. My mother battled mental illness, and she transitioned at an early age. And one of these same guys, when I wouldn't act right according to what he thought, because I had been through some stuff after I was abruptly kicked out of my so-called friend's house when my dad was coming to give me a trust fund. He was in New York at that time, and he was involved in some other stuff that he couldn't have a kid because he moved around. It wasn't no stability. But however, I didn't meet up with my dad until decades later upon him being deceased. And so I was staying from place to place, but I never went to them. I went to them one time because Spider D, where I came from, I was staying at Woodhall Avenue. That was in Hollis. And I really believe that my energy, because I believe in energy, that energy was a spark for so many people, like Run DMC, Jam Master Jay. I played with Jam Master Jay when he was Majestic. D from DMC when we were in junior high school, because I was a bad little girl, but I was going through things and I was doing something different, and I had to fight. I had to protect me because I had nobody else to protect me. And I had gotten thrown out of IS 238 in the seventh grade, and I had to go to 192. So, and all of us was at Born G's house. And I remember my mother really threatening me and my friend Pam. What's up, bro? I'm not a bro. I'm a female. I'm a woman. I'm a queen. They call me the Queen of Majesty. Um, so anyway, that was like a hub. But again, the foundation was Future Sounds, Unique Sounds, and Ebony Sounds. And I was the only female on both sides at one time. The other females came along later on, like Sweet Tea. I remember going up against them. It was three of them, and it was one of me with Crazy T. So I have stories, and I really believe that, my story is to be told in a different lane. But somebody has got to stand up, because look at these billionaires and look at the damage. People don't know about the damage and the harm that it causes people that have been assaulted as children. And unfortunately, sometimes in a dysfunctional household, someone may be looking for a safety net, just like Hassan Campbell. They always say, oh, he was in a full-fledged relationship. I don't believe that. He was groomed, and I often wonder about the children and Queen Society for Prevention for Cruelty to Children. Because I know when I left out of where I was staying, I was so broken, but I just suppressed it. Went on to college. Okay. Tag, like, share, and subscribe. Hit the like button. Please hit the like button, because I want this to go viral, so I can identify with everything that's going on. And unfortunately, in that household, a younger brother, got addicted to substances and made allegations that his sister was doing things to him. He got enough, gumption to say. And the uncles, and, nobody was monitoring his household. I was assaulted at 15 by one of the DJs. I was assaulted at 3 weeks before my 17th birthday from somebody that I knew that knew somebody in the neighborhood. As a young adult in my 20s, after I had my daughter, I was groomed again, and it makes you feel so dirty and everything. And I remember going to high school, and I remember Cheryl Salt. We all got kicked out the regular high school. I got transferred because one day I didn't do my homework, and I rapped in Grover Cleveland High School in English class. And they was like, wow, because before all of this stuff happened, me staying with my so-called friend's house after we had gotten discharged out of the group home, I need to take a step back because I always felt guilty that the little clan that I had, we were going to all the jams. My cousins had a crew. Um, this was in the latter 70s. Uh, Atomic Sounds, we went up against Cypher Sounds. That wasn't the first time I went up against Cypher Sounds. In fact, I was the first female to even be in a cipher because Cypher Sounds from South Jamaica, Queens, is the one that created the ciphers. And they will not give Tony Moore, who was DJ Understanding, that kind of credit. And they will not give the credit to me either. Um, a lot of my tapes were probably destroyed. So a lot was lost because I was so young. And if they found any footage because they're trying to go along with this narrative, it's just a shisty thing all around that they trying to ostracize certain people out the history because they want it to go a certain way. And it's not true. And I respect the craft and what the Bronx has done. And a lot of them DJs and them MCs are guilty. I spoke to someone else that's in, the music business and that was doing work with my cousin, one of my cousins, that, they're trying to, take care of my stuff because I'm not always in the best of health and I'm raising my two grandchildren. He was saying that a lot of them are not saying anything because they're criminals, and now you see that they're starting the churches of hip hop and the temple of hip hop, KRS-One. One thing that KRS-One said that I believe that was so true is this: a lot of the pioneers were not taking the record deals because it was something new. And for me, I heard what Sugar Hill was doing to the Furious Five, the Funky 4+1, and Sequence, and some people laughed about it. I didn't think it was a joke because I remember Miss Robinson approaching me when I was hanging out in Harlem and with my friend Rose, because Rose was from Harlem. And I remember K Slade, but he didn't go by that name then, and a guy named FM. But I'm not going to give too much. And I remember Poe. It's so many different things. I have a history, and I have a story. And I believe that my plight, if I can't be on every set and on every scene, my plight is the children. I have grandchildren. I think that our children need to be safe wherever they at. If they're riding a school bus, they should not be groomed. I believe that the laws need to be more stringent because in my case, it was the same individual that assaulted me as a teenager, and he also groomed me as a young adult. And my thing was, I never liked the guys that way. And I was a dope rapper. And they'll say, Google me, Google you, Google you. I'm not on Google, not yet. But I have the information. My thing is this: we wouldn't be here today if people wouldn't have been so intimidated. And if people would have stood up, because I remember once upon a time when people would say, don't bother with that person because that's jailbait, you know. And you did hear about, you don't sit on Uncle so-and-so's lap. When I was younger as a kid, I had to worry about the babysitter's son. I never had to worry about my cousins. I didn't worry about my girl cousins, my boy cousins, even when I was at Mona's house. And I didn't have to worry about her brothers, when I would stay weekends. I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't have to worry about my brothers when I was down in North Carolina. But unfortunately, those things happen. Young, young, older, teenagers, it's going on. And it really is a crisis. And it's a shame that, with the Diddy thing, that all of these people are impacted. So, I just wanted to tap in and talk about it. And, I really miss and I often think about those young children. And I remember the counselor when we were discharged. I thought it was because we was going to the jams and sometimes we would be AWOL and what have you. And it's only a few that I'm still in contact and that I've been able to find. And quite a few, I remember seeing them so strung out. And it's sad. It's sad because some of the children were discharged to boys' town and girls' town. And it was up to a staff member that I had ran into, Roy Wilkinson. He was a champion. He had enough gall to have to report his coworker, and I'll never forget his name, McCall. And he was well dressed, he smelled good, he had his nails, but the way he would come off that amplified speaker, Howie, come to the front desk. Howie, Rodney. And then, watching these boys come up through the pathway like a parking lot, you could see like their aura, like their soul was taken, but they weren't talking about it. And it took years when I was an adult with having my child, my daughter, my first daughter, that I would find out that us girls had to be discharged out of that group home because the boys needed a place to stay. And you hear about the churches, the Catholic Church and the priests and the hospitals and things like that. But you never hear about why Queensborough Society for Prevention for Cruelty to Children. What happened to those kids? And what happened to me? I've often, when I did run into those counselors, they would say, well, what happened with you with the rapping? And I could never say. You know what I mean? I could never say because they knew I was talented. I even ran I was the captain of the cheerleading team for QSPCC when we went up against the WBLS Sure Shots. There is so much probably documentation that's archived that unfortunately I'm not well enough to retrieve all of that. And I'm raising my grandchildren who have been traumatized. And a lot of times you have these bloggers that, talk about the white supremacy. But no, this is something that's among Black folks. And from what I can see, it's the same thing and the same pattern that through Black people, hi, toe grabber, it's the same thing as the Black folks that how we got into slavery because power, money, greed, trade. And then you have the cliques. You know, you have, thank you for subscribing. Like, share, and subscribe, okay? Thank you. And it's just horrible. And for me to be running from my mom in the setting in the household and thinking that a so-called friend is my friend and that household is safe. A lot of things, you cannot judge a book by its cover. I remember when I first met the mom, and it was probably something in me that said, you know what? Hi there, Tim from Silk and Lace, telling the truth. Yep, absolutely. Share, like, and subscribe. Yeah, and I just lost my train of thought anyway. But thinking that, somehow because when you become codependent, and I always was in rescue mode with my mom that wasn't always stable, and I was displaced even before the age of 5 because she was in a mental institution. But meeting someone else's mom and thinking that they're the cool mom, because that's the mom that's smoking the weed with the 13-year-olds and the 14-year-olds, and she's looking very young, and she has the cure for everybody's household. I remember seeing this lady with a black eye. And when she took her sunshades off, I was like, wow. And her daughter, who I thought was my friend, didn't want to talk about it, but she was battered, by her husband. They had lost their house on 189th Street. But then this woman being battered, she always was connected with this man, So when people talk about Cassie or any other victims, it's it's Stockholm syndrome. The same thing with Bam. People, will say, well, why did you keep going back? Because at some point, it becomes the norm. And it's like all until you can get up enough courage to figure out a rescue plan. That's what happened to me. I happened to go back. I finally got off of 8th Street, which I say, oh, that was the worst thing I could have done. But one of my daughters always tell me, she says, well, Mom, last time I ate cup of noodles, I couldn't shit for 3 days. Well, I'm sorry you couldn't shit for 3 days. The lad banned me. Oh, that's why he banned you? Okay. Well, you're not with Vlad. You with Tam Behind the Mic. So I'm behind here. Okay. Hi, Roblox. Glad to see you. Any event, it's a whole psychological thing. And unfortunately, survivors never get over it. They learn how to cope. And my partner Silk, it was her and I found her again. Kim Hunter. These same guys that messed up my damn demo. Your mother was a hamster and your father smelt of elderberries. Well, okay, I guess yours did too. Get him out of here, Silk. Molt. Let me see. Remove. Bye. Okay. Got you removed again, Mo. We're not playing those games. Games and tricks are for kids. This is a serious matter. Okay. Bye, Bonifa. Bye. I'm going to report you. Okay. Harassing. Okay. All right. There we go. Bye. Yeah. But anyway, I'm getting used to the chat and how you have some damn hackers that come in. Now your smell. That's my girl Silk. Yeah. Anyhow, I think somewhere in my warped mind, I thought that I could help this lady because of the issues that my mom had. And unfortunately, I didn't know all of that stuff was going on. And I don't think the social worker, Miss Messina, that's why I was trying to be good too. Because I felt guilty that us girls got discharged out this group home and we were all over the place. I thought it was my fault, but it wasn't my fault. So I was trying to be good, which was difficult because I was rapping and I was doing something that nobody else was doing. And I would freestyle on the bus, like I said, with Cheryl Salt on the side, And let me just change the topic because I don't want to just keep going on. Now about the music industry, a lot of people will say, oh, she's jealous she didn't make it. Well, the way that I see it now is that it may have been a blessing in disguise. Because, like my partner here, like she recorded with these same fucking guys, right? But her experience wasn't my experience with them because I had more of a history. And they kept manipulating, begging me, pleading me to replace the original silk lace. Guess who's back? I don't know how to make you a whatchamacallit, a monitor, a moderator, um, silk, but I'll figure it out sooner or later. Yeah, please leave. Thank you. Because if you don't have nothing to say, don't say anything at all, okay? All right. But the way that the commercial success, it was like these same guys were jerking everybody. And it happened to me at Queensbridge. Like I rapped in Queensbridge in the park. I remember Dimple D running into me and knowing exactly who I was for the 50th year anniversary. I did something different. I was in the park and I was in a meditation mode and I was grounded with the earth because what started out as innocence and a safe haven for the youngsters in the parks, the block parties. I guess, up in the Bronx, they had the community center, they had some parks, we had the house parties. And the way that the story is told, it's not an all size fit one. It's just not because of the demographics of the five boroughs. And then in 1977, before I left home, they were already mixing and stuff down in North Carolina at Billy Wood's place, which I had to obtain an old flyer from one of my brothers a couple of years ago, because all of a sudden they said, oh, we need flyers. But however, they have this hip hop guideline some years ago. A whole bunch of people was at the United Nations. That's how deep this hip hop is. And KRS One was there. So many other people were there, and they made up these rules. I have the documentation. I can't recall it verbatim, but I'll pull it out on another segment. And it was about somebody edifying who you are. And, even D from DMC said that, yeah, the museums was like perplexed. And I still have to send my archives up there to them. But I have to make sure that my stuff is copywritten, that's trademark and everything because it's such a shisty business. And it's been like that from the beginning. How many times I went to go get my song back from Russell Simmons in the tape, and a big MC wind up recording and my song has been sampled 20 times. They switched up some of the lyrics, but the chorus and the hooks are all the same. And now they want to be holy and sanctified. I believe, and it's just my opinion, that all of that is just a front. It's serving as protection, what Salt and Pepper is going through now, they're fighting with UMG just like Angie Stone. It's just the same way of an indirect slavery and how our own people sold one another out. And then once they saw a different genre, the powers that be jumped right on it. and they found a way. Nobody learned from Frankie Lyman. Nobody learned from James Brown. It's all the same thing. It's the same insanity. You do the same thing and you expect different results, but the results are all the same. It's insane. Now their music has been pulled from the streaming platforms, even though they're releasing another single, and I wish them all the best. But it's like, damn, I would have to go through all of that. And even like with my intellectual property, thank God I learned some stuff, because when I was homeless at 18, I went to college. I was staying from place to place because I was like, this ain't going to happen again. And I remember seeing Russell come in Leviticus. You're supposed to be 21 in Leviticus. But like a lot of youngsters was underage and they were sneaking, or they would get the fake ID. But I didn't have nothing fake when I was 15. I must say that. And they asked us our age. And I remember my friend seeing them doing the do and her getting pregnant and forced to have an abortion. And I think to this day, she's still what they call groupie in her fan base. But I was never none of that. But far as the music is concerned, even with Silk and Lace, here, my sister friend, we were a great duo. I was brought in to replace the first Lace because she wasn't cooperating, and it probably was some business mixed with pleasure, and and just sickness. And Silk did not receive the credit that she should have gotten. And that song went on to become on the top 100 Billboard. And one of the writers, all of a sudden, was discovered unalive. And he asked about his money. So I don't put nothing past nobody. But am I scared? Hell no. I'm sipping on some tea as I talk to you all. But it's a dirty, dirty game. And, when we have politicians that are saying, oh, we know that there were some things that happened at first, like Eric Adams. I remember Eric because Eric was, I don't think he was a friend of my cousin no more, because, the way that I've been done and my family and my daughter, he must have been an associate. But I know Kat knew him. Everybody knew him, just like I knew Sabrina, 50 Cent's mother. And I remember 50 when he was a little toddler, in the park. And for him to say, that it was very minor, no. Jaguar Wright said it plainly, that the impact that it has had on us socially, you can't even imagine the damages. I remember Sonetta, because I've, been watching these blogs for decades. Well, yeah, not for decades, because when my daughter passed, I was off and on. I had to detach from social media because it just wasn't no good. Excuse me, sipping on this tea. It was unnecessary. Okay, I forgive you. And I forgot my chain of thought. So anyway, I was saying that all right, my mind just went a blank looking at the chat. Let me take another sip of this tea. So it's really very unfortunate that the culture has been overshadowed by what's really going on. And when I was watching Sonetta, and he was doing some kind of filming on 125th Street on the east side. And it was this young lady, and she looked really, really bad. And he interviewed her, and she said that, because he said, I heard that you used to be uh, a dope MC. And she said, yes. And I just could not even imagine what happened to her and what she went through. And I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to close out. In my situation, I never realized that as a teenager that these grown men were using the teens to solicit more children. And I didn't realize that there was some kind of ritual. And in addition, I must leave you all with this, that a lot of the guys, I'm not even going to leave you with that. I'm going to continue on. I kind of lied. I didn't lie. I kind of overspoke, I should say, because it's not a lie. A lot of the heterosexual men think that they're not gay if they still like women. Let that sink in. A lot of heterosexual men, and it may be women too, do not claim to be part of all of those initials, because I get them all mixed up, gay, because they still like the other sex. And that's why you'll see a lot of these men are hiding because they have wives, and they have all of these guys. There's really something to it. They've had these O's and they don't feel like there's anything wrong with it. And there isn't, as long as you have consenting adults. But when you don't have that, when you're manipulated and you're narcissistic and you're sick in the head and you think that everybody wants you and you have to get them so intoxicated so you could take advantage of them, is ridiculous. And it's so unfair and it's disheartening. And the damage that it's causing in the Black and brown and Latino communities. We will never know the statistics and the real talents that were tarnished and that were harmed. It's but for the grace of God and those angels above that continue to watch over me. And I say I'm not in the predicament that I could be running on stage with LL and all of that stuff, and that's just another story, because I've attended Farmers Day because I'm from that area. St. Albans with Deb Anthony, Bimmy, all of them. I watched Bimmy and his brother grow up. All of that. I know the history. And I know who was out there and who was the foundation. And what's so been sad is that you have all of these people that are millionaires that could have came back like Tulsa, and they could have built their communities up again, because Farmers does not look the same way by that red, black, and green rock that it used to. There should be community centers besides what he's doing in O'Connell Park. And let me mention O'Connell Park. I'm the only female that I know of to date that performed in O'Connell Park. But Sweet Tea has a mural there, and she'll say, yeah, I'm glad that they allowed me to do this. And I was like, should I make a big stink? And even the Queensborough president is from St. Albans. And I have yet to send some correspondence on my behalf as well as the other crews. Now, I've spoken to him, and I was supposed to be honored from him for the 50th year, but being the fact that those other guys, and I don't know if he's in the same clique or whatever, but I know that when you look at the pieces on the chessboard, you can see where the groups are grouping at. Now, I'm not saying what anybody is doing because I don't know, because I'm not there. But you can kind of just guess, and that's so unfortunate because a lot of investments could have been made in these communities instead of destroying them. And the music, the negative vibration, now things are so x-rayed because it was the vibration in the beginning once it went commercial. Like Salt and Pepper started out with, I'll take your man because I got it like that, right? And then they talked about, let's talk about sex, and I don't know if they were writing everything or the guys was writing, but those were like mixed messages. And then as it went on, then sex sells, and then you had the little Kim and all of that, and people say it's art, but music is a vibration. It's a stimuli in the brain, so it's kind of powerful, and what happens is it starts manifesting and taking different forms. And unfortunately, yep, absolutely. Like Bam's, I'm reading the chat. Need to watch Kev Rowe University. He teaches the truth. I certainly will. Like Bam's boys that carry Bam's crates. Absolutely. If you watch Leila Will's documentary, there's so many parts to it, trapped in a culture. And that's exactly what it is. So if the Bronx want to claim all of that, all fine, well, and good. But a lot of pioneers that didn't, and there was more people than the Disco Twins. There was more crews before them. I have a lot of interviews that as I acquire more subscribers, that I'll probably be able to move over to members only or Patreon platform, because some things that we'll need to deep dive in is not in the guidelines within YouTube. But people would love to have me silenced. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. And then when you rise above it, on the face of it, it looks like, oh, you're doing so well. No. You sleep at night, the nightmares, and then something can happen and it just triggers the memories. And, when you're not using substances anymore, powdering your nose, because I've had these same damn guys come for my grandkids. And my family members would love to see them, right? My daughter took a toll. Silk could tell you, I had her up in the Bronx, babysitters, I had to pay people to watch her and all of that. We paid for our outfits, and the last time we would ever see one another is the last time we did that show, and we shut the damn place down, and we was ready to record. But, people do crazy things. Like, I'm not going to keep quiet, and I hope and pray that a lawyer hit you up, Kim, in regards to what they did to you. So now it's a shady damn business. From the beginning, like I said, Spider D referred me to Russell Simmons. I was supposed to audition for Beach Street, and I was so displaced. It was awful. And then I would still interact with that family when I got on my feet, very minimum. And just before my little brother died, because he told his mom, and people are sick when they're assaulted. You grow to your 70s and you'll be in denial and you'll make excuses. Meanwhile, your whole lineage line is full of cesspool, and you had the opportunity to kind of heal it through some therapy. But no, some people become very promiscuous, like she did, and like she taught her daughter. And I was different, but I was the one that was getting assaulted because I wasn't free for all. Crazy. But he had convinced me after my daughter passed, like, you should contact them, that, oh, such and such, bought a house. And then I think the same person, I'm going to be nice and I ain't going to call her EVIL, Silk, for now, that had the big booty and all of that, big booty Judy, but I had the beauty and I had the talent. And she admitted to being jealous of me. And once somebody admits, they never stop being jealous or envious. And once I, was able to secure some real estate and kind of do a little better, but I've never been able to be a whole person. I do the best I can. She used to send her daughter to, like, you want to play this aunt thing. And then I got sick of playing play because this was doing me more harm, but I needed to have closure. My therapist said there was a part of you that needed that closure, that needed to know the facts. And my little brother told me. And it's so unfortunate that he got on that crack and he could never get off of it. And she thought that everybody was supposed to help him. And I told him, you need therapy. And then she wouldn't believe that, the daughter was doing certain things. But how could you not? And then it was so grueling that one of the uncles, they lived in Yonkers. They were from Yonkers. True fact. One of the uncles was off by one of the nephews because he was caught doing something to a little baby. And I don't think he did any much time, but I had the pleasure of meeting him at one of the functions in Long Island some years ago. And I had to cut off all contact from them people because it was so unhealthy and it was so heart-wrenching. And again, when my little brother was discovered, he had left a treatment place. I told her, and she was trying to spin it, that it was his heart, but his wife contacted me once the autopsy was done and told me what happened. And I had already knew what happened, so they couldn't fool me. And it's awful when you're betrayed, by your mom, and you're betrayed by the government and the system that's supposed to be in place to protect children. Now, with all of this stuff, with Afrika Bambaataa, with Diddy, and with all the rest of them, because they don't have clean hands, none of them. That's why they're quiet as I don't know what. That's why I see that the museum's grand opening has been pushed back to 2026. It was supposed to open up this year, but it's not. The thing is, and the thing that myself and Leila Wills were protesting for, my thing wasn't about people like Afrika Bambaataa, allegedly, because it was alleged. I knew that, they always said that he was gay. And, and other people were saying, when I inquired, oh, we knew it because he didn't have no girls around him. Well, there was a lot of people that had girls around them, but they had more dudes around them too. And the girls was just only a damn front, to be honest. Really. That's what the hell was going on. But, all these people have been robbed. A lot of people have been robbed in the business. I ran into T Spunk from Astoria because, like I said, I was known all over, even Eric B. And people know the truth. But I'm not going to sell my soul for nobody. And I'm not going to change my timeline when I started, my history, and what I know for anyone. So, in closing, for all those that say, oh, she wasn't there. Hell, you wasn't there in Queens, in Lincoln Park, in Ajax Park, in Van Wyck, in 40 Projects, in 150 Park, in 48 Park, in Henderson Avenue, in Keysville, in the house parties. You get what I'm saying? Or Cooper Projects. Yeah, it was in the 80s when they was at St. Gabriel's. I rocked with the Soundmasters from Brooklyn, Greenpoint. So I have a lot of interviews and I like to unroll a lot of things. And, at that, let the chips fall where they may. But there needs to be a component to heal the damage that's been done in the past. Nobody want to see people hiding, the P words behind churches and all of this stuff. And now you want to be spiritual. There's nothing damn spiritual about no damn hip hop. And at that, I'm Tam Behind the Mic. And that's it. Have a nice evening. See ya.